What would you do if the man you loved left you paralyzed, only to marry another woman? For Sophia, this was just the beginning. On the night of my wedding rehearsal, I saved the man I loved from death, only to watch him abandon me for another woman. The night before my wedding, I should have been overwhelmed with joy, finalizing last-minute details with my fiancé, Ethan Cole. Instead, I stood frozen in the living room, clutching my phone as his face twisted with guilt. "She's critically ill, Sophia," he said, pacing the floor. I can't just ignore her call. He was talking about her, Stella White, the woman he had once called the love of his life. I thought she was in the past, but here she was, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be my happiest moment. "You're leaving now, on the eve of our wedding." My voice cracked, disbelief mingling with anger. "Ethan, we've been planning this for months. You can't just drop everything for her." He looked at me with what I can only describe as pity. "It's not what you think. She's dying, Sophia. I have to see her." In that moment, something inside me broke. I begged, I pleaded, but he wouldn't listen. With a quick apology, he grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving me to drown in the weight of his choice. Driven by desperation, I followed him. The roads were slick with rain, the windshield wipers barely keeping up. My heart pounded as I saw his car ahead, speeding toward an intersection. And then it happened, a truck barreling through the red light. Time slowed. Without thinking, I swerved my car into the path of the truck, shielding Ethan from the impact. The last thing I remembered was the sound of metal crunching and Ethan's panicked voice calling my name. When I woke up, the world was a blur of pain and sterile white walls. My body felt foreign, heavy, unresponsive. A doctor stood by my side, his face grave. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. "But the accident caused severe spinal injuries. I'm sorry, Sophia, but you're paralyzed from the waist down." The words hit me harder than the crash itself. I tried to process the reality. My legs, my independence, my life as I knew it, gone in an instant. Ethan was there, sitting at the edge of my hospital bed. His face was pale, his eyes brimming with guilt. "Sophia, I'm so sorry," he whispered, clutching my hand. "I'll never leave your side. I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." For a fleeting moment, I believed him. Despite everything, I thought his promise might be real. But reality has a cruel way of shattering illusions. A week later, as I struggled to adjust to life in a wheelchair, Ethan's behavior began to change. The man who had vowed to stay by my side grew distant. He spent more time away, his phone calls brief and filled with excuses. One evening I overheard a hushed conversation between Ethan and his mother in the hallway. "She's a burden now, Mom," he said, his voice low but sharp. I don't want to spend the rest of my life taking care of her. I still love Stella. She needs me." Tears streamed down my face as his words cut through me. I wanted to confront him, to scream at him, but the weight of betrayal left me speechless. Days later, Ethan made his intentions clear. He sat across from me in the living room, avoiding my eyes as he spoke. "Sophia, I think it's best if we postpone the wedding until you've recovered." I let out a bitter laugh. "Recovered? Ethan, I'm paralyzed. This isn't something I can just bounce back from. Be honest, this isn't about my recovery. It's about her, isn't it?" He flinched, but didn't deny it. His silence was louder than any confession. The next morning, the wedding was officially canceled, and the headlines screamed the news. "Business tycoon, Ethan Cole, Mary's first love. Stella White in private ceremony." The betrayal was complete. Sitting alone in my empty apartment, I stared at the wedding dress still hanging in my closet. The pristine white fabric mocked me, a cruel reminder of what could have been. But as the pain gnawed at my soul, it gave way to something stronger. Anger. This wasn't just about Ethan leaving me for Stella. It was about the humiliation, the broken promises, and the way they had discarded me like I was nothing. I wasn't going to let them win. I started small. The night before Ethan's lavish wedding to Stella, I uploaded a single post on social media. Alongside a picture of my wedding dress, I wrote, "The man I loved for 6 years abandoned me after a car accident left me paralyzed. He broke our engagement to marry someone else. Is this the love story you admire?" The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times, with comments flooding in from people around the world. "What a coward. He doesn't deserve you. Stay strong. Karma will catch up to him. Expose them. Don't let them get away with this." Ethan's perfect public image began to crack. News outlets picked up the story, painting him as the villain. Meanwhile, I quietly gathered my strength, determined to make my next move. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Ethan's company was hosting a charity gala, a high-profile event with journalists and socialites in attendance. With the help of an old friend, I secured an invitation and made my entrance. I wore a sleek black dress, tailored to perfection, and rolled into the venue in my wheelchair. Heads turned as I entered, whispers trailing behind me. But I didn't care. I was there for one reason: to confront Ethan. He spotted me from across the room, his face going pale. Stella stood beside him, clinging to his arm, her expression a mix of shock and disdain. I didn't wait for them to approach me. I wheeled myself straight to the center of the room, where the microphone stood. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I'd like to share a story, a personal one." The room fell silent as I recounted everything: the accident, Ethan's promises, his betrayal, and his decision to leave me for Stella. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as I spoke, but I didn't stop. I ended with a sharp, cutting remark. "Ethan Cole may present himself as a man of integrity, but the truth is far from it. He abandoned me when I needed him most. Tonight, I want everyone here to see the reality behind his facade." The fallout was immediate. Ethan's sponsors began pulling out, investors questioned his leadership, and his once sterling reputation was tarnished. Stella tried to defend him, but her attempts only fueled the fire. That night, as I left the gala, I felt a spark of satisfaction. It was only the beginning. But for the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my life again. The aftermath of the gala was chaotic. Ethan's public image lay in shambles, and Stella's carefully crafted facade began to crumble. It didn't take long for rumors to surface, whispers of how Stella had faked her illness to lure Ethan back, how she had always played the victim to get her way. I wasn't surprised. I knew Stella wasn't the weak, innocent woman she pretended to be, but I needed proof to expose her once and for all. One afternoon, while reviewing the messages Ethan had sent me during our relationship, I stumbled upon something peculiar: a trail of transactions tied to Stella's bank account. Money Ethan had sent her months before she claimed to be critically ill. My hands trembled with anger as I realized what this meant. Stella had been manipulating him all along, using him as her personal bank. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper. Within days, I had everything I needed: medical records proving Stella was never sick, along with photos of her partying at exclusive clubs during the time she was supposedly bedridden. Armed with this evidence, I prepared for my next move. I didn't wait for the perfect opportunity. I created it. Stella was hosting a lavish charity auction in her name, an event designed to showcase her as a benevolent socialite. I made sure I was on the guest list, but this time I didn't come alone. As the event reached its peak, I signaled to my investigator, who connected my laptop to the venue's massive screen. The room dimmed, and Stella's smiling face froze as her secrets played out before everyone. First, the fake medical records appeared, with bold text overlaying them. No signs of illness. Then came the photos: Stella sipping champagne, dancing under neon lights, while Ethan was by my hospital bed, believing her lies. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, and murmurs of betrayal filled the air. Stella's face turned white as she frantically tried to stop the presentation, but it was too late. The final slide showed the financial transactions, a clear trail of her greed. I took the microphone, my voice steady and sharp. This is the woman who tore apart my life. She faked an illness to steal my fiancé, manipulated him for money, and lied to everyone in this room. Is this the kind of person you admire? The crowd turned on Stella almost instantly. Reporters bombarded her with questions, and attendees whispered harsh words as they walked out. Stella, cornered and humiliated, tried to defend herself. "This is a lie," she shouted, pointing at me. "She's just bitter and jealous because Ethan chose me." I raised an eyebrow and replied, "The only thing I'm bitter about is wasting my time on people like you." The truth speaks for itself, Stella. You can't fake your way out of this. As the event unraveled, I caught sight of Ethan entering the room. His eyes darted between Stella and the screen, realization dawning on his face. He walked straight to her, his voice low but audible. "Is it true?" he asked. "Did you fake everything?" Stella stammered, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, I only did it because I love you. I was scared of losing you." His expression hardened. "You didn't love me. You loved what I could give you." For the first time, Ethan turned his back on Stella. But instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt nothing. His regret couldn't undo the damage he had caused. That night, as I left the event, I realized something important. This wasn't about Ethan or Stella anymore. It was about me reclaiming my life, one step at a time. After the chaos of Stella's public exposure, I thought I'd finally seen the last of Ethan and his toxic family, but I underestimated their desperation. It started with a phone call late one evening. I hesitated to pick up when I saw Ethan's name flash on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered, curious about what he could possibly want. "Sophia," his voice was raw, almost pleading. "Please, I need to see you, just one last time." I scoffed. "Last time I checked, you made your choice. What could you possibly have to say to me now?" "Stella's gone," he admitted, after a long pause. "She left as soon as the truth came out. I don't know what to do anymore." There it was. The man who had once promised to stand by me was now alone, abandoned by the very woman he chose over me. I could feel a pang of pity, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of his betrayal. The next day, Ethan showed up at my office uninvited. His appearance was shocking, disheveled, pale, and far from the confident businessman I once knew. My colleagues stared as he knelt in front of me, a pitiful sight. "Sophia," he began, his voice cracking, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you, please, give me another chance." I folded my arms, staring down at him. "Another chance? After everything you've done? You threw me away when I needed you most, Ethan. Why would I ever trust you again?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was the engagement ring he had once given me. "Because I still love you," he said. "I was blind, Sophia. I didn't see what I had until it was too late. Please, let me make it right." The audacity of his plea left me speechless for a moment. But then I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the office. "Love," I repeated, my tone sharp. "Ethan, love isn't abandoning someone in their darkest hour. Love isn't marrying someone else while I was left paralyzed. You don't love me. You love the idea of me forgiving you so you can feel better about yourself." His parents weren't far behind. That evening, they showed up at my parents' house, their faces pale with desperation. "Sophia, you have to help Ethan," his mother begged. "He's lost everything, his company, his reputation. He needs you." I stepped forward, my voice calm but resolute. "He lost everything because of his own choices, And as for your family, you've done nothing but belittle and manipulate me. I owe you nothing." My father, standing behind me, crossed his arms. "You heard her. Now get off our property before I make you." Ethan's parents left humiliated, but I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. They had one last card to play, and they weren't afraid to use it. A week later, I received an unexpected visitor. Naomi Wang, Stella's so-called best friend, and the self-proclaimed mediator who had tried to ruin me before. She was holding a microphone, her cameraman trailing behind her. "Sophia," Naomi began, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Don't you think it's time to let the past go? Ethan is suffering, and the world is watching how heartless you've become." I rolled my eyes. "Naomi, the world isn't stupid. They know exactly who you and Ethan are. If you're here to manipulate me, you're wasting your time." Naomi smirked. "Oh, Sophia, the camera doesn't lie. Let's see how your cold-heartedness plays with the public." I pulled out my phone, revealing that I'd been live streaming her antics the entire time. Comments poured in. Naomi's at it again. She never learns. "Stay strong, Sophia. We're with you. Expose her lies." Naomi's face turned pale as she realized her plan had backfired. Her cameraman muttered, "Naomi, we should leave before this gets worse." She tried to snatch my phone, but I stepped back, keeping the camera on her. "Everyone watching, this is the mediator Naomi Wang, defending a man who abandoned his fiancée for a liar. Let's make sure her lies don't go unnoticed." The backlash was swift. By the next day, Naomi's sponsors began dropping her, and her online presence dwindled into obscurity. As for Ethan, his final attempt to reconcile with me came in the form of a letter. In it, he apologized for everything and asked for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Some doors are meant to stay closed. After Ethan's desperate attempts to reconnect, I finally felt the weight of my past beginning to lift. I had faced his betrayal, exposed Stella's lies, and stood firm against the manipulative schemes of those who once held power over me. Now, for the first time in years, I was free to focus on myself. One morning, as sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, I found myself smiling. Not out of spite or victory, but genuine happiness, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. I decided it was time to let go of the remnants of my old life. The first step was to cut all remaining ties with Ethan. I sold the shares of his company that I had acquired during our relationship. The money I received was more than enough to start a new chapter. When news of the sale reached Ethan, he called me in a fit of rage. "You sold your shares," he shouted over the phone. "Do you know what you've done? That company is sinking without those funds." I took a deep breath before responding, my tone calm. "Ethan, those shares were mine, just like my life is mine. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. It's time for you to face the consequences." "You're heartless," he hissed. "No, Ethan," I replied firmly. "I've just learned to stop letting you take from me." I ended the call, feeling an incredible sense of relief. For the first time, I had taken control of my life and refused to let anyone dictate my future. My next focus was rebuilding my career. With the funds from the shares, I started my own business, a nonprofit organization supporting women who had faced abuse and betrayal. The work was challenging but rewarding. For every woman I helped, I felt a piece of my heart heal. One day, during a community event, I met someone who would change my life forever. His name was Lucas, a kind-hearted architect who volunteered his time to design shelters for survivors. Unlike Ethan, Lucas didn't shower me with empty promises. Instead, his actions spoke louder than words. We started as colleagues, then friends, and eventually something more. Lucas never saw my wheelchair as a limitation. He saw me as a person, strong, determined, and capable. For the first time, I felt what it was like to be loved for who I truly was. As for Ethan, his life continued to spiral downward. Without the financial backing from my shares, his company faced bankruptcy. Stella, having disappeared after her public disgrace, left him entirely alone. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved back in with his parents, who were also struggling to cope with the fallout. One evening, I received news that Ethan had been hospitalized. His health had deteriorated rapidly, likely from the stress and isolation. I considered visiting him, but decided against it. Some chapters are better left closed. Months later, as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past no longer haunted me. I had faced my demons, reclaimed my power, and built a life filled with purpose and hope. The rain began to fall softly, but instead of retreating inside, I stayed, letting it wash over me. For the first time, the storm didn't feel like a curse. It felt like a cleansing, a reminder that even after the darkest nights, the sun always rises. I whispered to myself, I'm free. Months turned into a year, and my life flourished in ways I never imagined. My nonprofit organization grew rapidly, receiving recognition and support from people worldwide. Women who had been silenced found their voices through our platform, and I realized that my pain had led me to create something truly meaningful. But as life moved forward, I couldn't ignore the whispers about Ethan. His name occasionally surfaced in conversations, always paired with stories of his decline. He was no longer the charismatic businessman I had once known, but a shadow of his former self. Still, I kept my distance, knowing that my chapter with him had ended. One rainy afternoon, I received an unexpected letter. The handwriting was shaky, almost unrecognizable, but the name at the bottom was clear, Ethan Cole. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The letter was short, filled with apologies and regrets. He admitted to his mistakes, recounting how his obsession with Stella had blinded him to what truly mattered. He expressed remorse for how he had treated me and revealed that his health was failing. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, the letter concluded, but I needed you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sorry I realized it too late. I read the letter twice, searching for any lingering anger or bitterness, but instead, I felt nothing. Ethan was a part of my past, a painful lesson that had shaped who I was. Forgiveness wasn't for him, it was for me. So, I let the letter go, filing it away in the deepest recesses of my mind. Days later, news reached me that Ethan had passed away. He died quietly, surrounded only by hospital staff. There was no grand redemption, no final confrontation, just the end of a broken man's story. I attended his funeral, not out of obligation, but to close the door on that chapter of my life for good. Standing at his grave, I placed a single white lily on the freshly turned soil. Goodbye, Ethan, I whispered, my voice steady. I hope you find peace. As I turned to leave, I felt no sadness or regret, only a profound sense of freedom. Ethan's story had ended, but mine was far from over. That evening, as I sat with Lucas under a canopy of stars, I realized how far I had come. The woman I was a year ago would have been consumed by grief and anger, but now I was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the life I had built for myself. Lucas took my hand in his warmth grounding me in the present. Sophia, he said softly, you've been through so much, but you've come out of it with so much grace. I'm proud of you. I smiled, a genuine smile that reflected the peace in my heart. I'm proud of me too, I replied. The past was behind me, and the future stretched out like an open road, full of endless possibilities. The storm that once engulfed me had passed, and now I stood in the sunlight, ready to face whatever came next. Months later, my nonprofit hosted its largest event yet, raising record-breaking funds for women in need. As I stood on stage, looking out at the crowd of supporters, I felt a sense of purpose I had never known before. This isn't just about me, I said into the microphone. It's about all of us. Our strength, our resilience, and our ability to rise above the challenges life throws at us. Together, we're unstoppable. The audience erupted in applause, and as I rolled off the stage, Lucas was there waiting for me, his smile as steady as ever. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.